about the camera that you were actually using and also how you were modeling. I think it was an Alexa 65 you were modeling with it. But just kind of tell us about that whole process.
Well, when you go in, when you're in virtual reality, and just eliminate virtual and just think of reality, because it was every bit as real for us when we put on the goggles. And you would go in there, and then you would watch what was animated. You'd watch the animals, and they'd go walking by, and then you say, well, I'd like to have a dolly here. And I would have a viewfinder where I could adjust the number, the lens. It was actually infinite. It wasn't like you have a 25, 35, 50. It was hard to get an exact lens. So sometimes you'd end up with a 52.3 for some reason.
Yeah.
See, that matters. But I mean, you try to adjust it to sort of, get it within a range of a wide lens or medium or long lens. So then what you would do, you would say, well, I want to dolly from here. I would sort of move along with them, and I'd say, I'd like to dolly from here to here. And I had one of the tools that I had in virtual reality is that you have a kind of slate that had a picture of a flag, and you would take your controller and you would hold it on the flag and you would click it, and then you had a flag in your hand, and you would put the flag and you would release it where you wanted to start the dolly.
Oh my God.
You would move over to where the end of the dolly was, and you would get another flag and mark there. And then what would happen is that the computer guys would then create a dolly track within virtual reality. And then what they would do is that they would attach the dolly in virtual reality to a real dolly that we had on stage. So we would actually have a real live dolly grip pulling the dolly along with it. So it would have a human feel to it. It wouldn't just be very mechanical, that it would just sort of move exactly the way. It would actually have a feeling, and you get that feeling. And then the camera, which you would see, in virtual reality, you would set the camera, and it was like modeled after the Alexa 65, but it was just an image of that. And you would set the lens, and you'd have it on the dolly, and then you would have that hooked up to a gear head, for instance, or it could be a fluid head, depending on what we were doing, but we usually use a gear head. So then we would come out of virtual reality, and then on my monitor, I see exactly what the camera in virtual reality is seeing. And then we would start the animals, and we would rehearse, and the dolly grip would move along, and we'd try it once. I go, it'd be great if you got a little bit ahead of them here. So just speed up a little bit more here, and then get around to the front, and then when they stop, you stop here. And, then we would record what we were doing. And, it was pretty amazing.
What were you actually holding? Like, first of all, were you operating, or did you have an operator?
Well, I mostly operated, although sometimes, the main thing is we brought a Steadicam operator in, Henry Turrell, who's a really wonderful Steadicam operator. We brought him in, and, it was a process for him to learn how to operate, because, when you're operating a Steadicam, you're usually in the real space, but here he's just walking on a flat surface. And sometimes in the computer, they would tilt the surface. So when he went from one part of the stage to another, he'd actually be going downhill or be going uphill or, stepping over rocks or whatever. So that became, part of the process. At first it was mostly done with, regular cameras on dollies or with a long lens, just static, maybe as if it was on a tripod or whatever. But then we became more adventuresome, and there was a system called Optitracks, and Optitracks is a series of cameras that were all around the ceiling of the stage. And what they would do is that they could read a controller, which was basically a series of LED lights. I think there's something like 8 LED lights that would then be a camera. And you could then hand hold the camera in Optitracks, and when you would When you would tilt it, it would tilt the camera, and when you dropped it down, it would go lower, and if you moved to the right or left, it would move. So anywhere within the OptiTrack space in the stage, you could move this controller, and it would be as if you were moving a camera.
Wow.
So, that was the first thing we did, and we did some handheld stuff inside the caves when the cubs are being chased by the hyenas. And, it became, since it was all new, it became, how do you do this? Because
I love that.
The tunnels were very complex, so you'd have to draw with tape on the ground exactly where you were moving, so that you would go left and then right and then up and then down. And we would even build platforms on the stage so that if we could go up a little higher and a little bit farther down. And it was just, it was a year of invention. I mean, it was like being back in film school and saying, all right, here's a brand new tool. How do we use it? And how can we help tell this story with these tools, in a better way? I mean, for instance, when we had the Steadicam, the space was about a 25-foot square space that OptiTrack could control, and yet, because we were not filming like in animation. Generally, you film just little shots. You say, okay, we need this shot, we need this shot, but because we had, entire scenes, in a file. For instance, when, Pumbaa and Timon are singing Wimoweh, and they're coming down a hill and everything, we were able to cover that whole thing in one long shot. And we covered it with a Steadicam, but we found, because we were limited by the 25-foot square feet, we were actually having to travel 130 feet in virtual reality. We made this discovery that we could actually hook the entire floor that the Steadicam is on to the dolly and then move it 150 feet. And then within that 150 feet, Henry could, walk around the animals and move closer and move farther back. But then you had the added complication of the dolly is moving at a certain speed and the Steadicam can move at a certain speed. So then you had to rehearse between the dolly grip and Henry who was going to do what, who was going to move faster and farther and right, and it became this sort of amazing choreography and dance between the dolly grip and Henry, in working out these shots. And it became, you were able to do things that were both, acceptable in terms of the realism of movie making, and yet at the same time, if you really thought it through, you'd realize how extraordinary they were,
Now, I know your camera was modeled, I guess we've been saying, but did they model like the attributes of the camera or the lenses? Like, were you modeling lenses to get specific elements of a lens package?
Yeah, well, we ended up, wanting to, because listen, lenses are never perfect, and the lenses that we had were basically perfect lenses. I mean, so what you wanted to do was sort of build into them the sort of aberrations that that you would get in a in a real lens. So that became a really important aspect of it too. And we actually. Dan Sasaki, who designs lenses for Panavision, is really a genius about it. And he actually designed the lens that we used, the zoom lens we used in Africa, so that we would be able to, film the kind of things we did. And he came in and spoke to, all the people involved about, all the different aberrations that you get from different lenses and what they look like. And it's really amazing, because if you see a perfect lens and you see something photographed with a perfect lens, it feels kind of unreal, whereas lenses all have sort of slight, astigmatisms and all sorts of things in them that we become used to. I mean, like if you look at an anamorphic lens, there tends to be, very sort of, soft at the top and bottom, and then, there's certain amounts of distortion, that sometimes it's called mumping, where it'll make a face look bigger, and so you would sometimes use different lenses for different distances because of how the anamorphic is altering the lens and everything. And we didn't shoot anamorphic, but we really wanted to have an understanding of that so that we would really it would inform us while we were filming. So listen, the whole process was a huge learning curve, and was a huge it was like being in a sandbox all the time, playing around with different toys and trying them and seeing how you could use them in different ways to help tell the story.
It just seems like so much fun. It just like what an adventure.